This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Chapter 34. What fresh hell. A myth is not a lie. It's a bigger truth. Rather, a story told to reveal bigger truths. Truths that touch each of us at some time or another. Myths are not old and outdated. Urban legends, for example, speak to something more today. There's one I often tell to explain the conundrum we are in with artificial intelligence. Back at the turn of the century, urban legend has it that there was a city planning meeting where there was much discussion about the rapidly growing New York City. One planner suggested that others need not worry. Population would be limited by the amount of horseshit they could get out of the city. Of course, the automobile was about to arrive as one of the greatest disruptors of all time. Today, AI is full of horseshit problems. We are solving for things that won't matter and unable to foresee what will. I'm not at all sure that meeting ever took place, but that's not the point. The myth of our arrogance and ignorance rings true. There is evidence of it any time we encounter something new. If you look at romance movies, comedies, action movies, or even zombie flicks, we can learn of the myths of today. I'm not saying these are wise myths. Likely this is why humanity is so very off course. I'm just saying they're there, available to anyone who cares to look with a mythological lens. We tell these larger-than-life stories to unearth archetypal patterns, excavate complexities, make sense of apparent oxymorons. In other words, to grow older and wiser at the same time. But do we? Do we even think about how these mythological stories are shaping us? How much did you think about stories before listening to me for all these chapters? What we have lost in our just the facts, ma'am reality are the value of myths as teaching stories. All the things that can go wrong and likely will, not only to you, but to all of us, any of us, at any time. Unless you are perfect, which none of us are. Unless you live entirely sheltered, which none of us should. As a professional storyteller, I was likely more aware of this than most. Even so, there was that one, against all odds, that became my psyche's bread and butter. Given my life and love stories thus far, you might think I'm talking about the myth of romance. Pink hearts and flowers, chocolates too, maybe. But I'm not talking about that. Romance is lovely, and I hope you get all you can find. Romance can be sparked, nurtured, and lived, and so that myth can be turned into greater truths. Even if only short-lived, I take nothing away from that sweetness, should anyone be fortunate enough to encounter it. Go for it, I say. No, the myth I am talking of is what happens after the bloom of romance. The myth of happily ever after. Not a pause for intermission. Not an until the next mountain you must climb. Not a then they went and figured out the prenup and who will take on the responsibility of birth control. Truth. Any story that ends on a high note is selling you something. Hard. Sadly, no matter how much we love the idea of a forever love, it won't be. It can't be, at least not on this earth in this body. At minimum, someone is going to die. I should have known that. I, of all people, should have known that. But I didn't want to know that. And so I made up fictional stories about love. In specific, my love with Scotty. He said, forever, and I chose to believe him. As with all good storytelling, I was more than willing to suspend my disbelief. Blind, committed, no other option. I will never be able to fully explain what that illusion cost me, though it is now my task to try. Enter the labyrinth. Just as I am not at liberty to share the full story of Scotty and I coming together, I'm not at liberty to share the story of our disillusion. But honestly, I don't need to. We were quite average, save perhaps how fast it happened, how clean the cut, and how little story there was left between us. We were, and then we were not. At the time, I had just signed the lease on a tiny one-room above the garage apartment in downtown Palo Alto, California, the heart of Silicon Valley. My neighbors were Mark Zuckerberg out the one way, and the wife of Steve Jobs, and all her security guards, out the other way. I went to grow my clientele in AI, but also because for the first time, when visiting, I had heard a voice that said, "You could live here." For the record, I am now really, really cautious about such voices. It made no sense, because Scotty would never leave our farm, and I would never permanently move without him. But it made some sense for me to go temporarily and part-time. Scotty and I mutually agreed for me to be bi-coastal for a year, but 2 months in, it was over. We were over. I lost everything pretty much all at once. Scotty, the sound of his voice, the way he walked up the front porch steps for a kiss after a long day on the farm, the conversations only we shared, the intense lovemaking, the friendship, the trust. But also, I lost the front porch swing, our beautiful farm on 300 acres, all the furniture I had curated over the years, since nothing fit in the already furnished 200-square-foot apartment in California. Most of the artwork, too, because we had gotten it together and I just couldn't. Also, no longer living near my children for the first time, or any of my local friends. I knew one person in California, and she lived over an hour away. I saw her once every few months and was grateful for that. I saw almost no one else. Also, my body revolted and partly shut down. For the first time in my life, it was an effort to eat. I walked to a local salad shop at lunchtime once a day, ate half, and then ate the other half for dinner. My left leg went numb on occasion for no reason, so that often when out walking I would stumble. 3 times I fell forward onto my knees on a perfectly flat sidewalk. Sometimes in the middle of a simple walk down the street, my leg would lock and I would not be able to walk at all. Yet there was nothing wrong, according to the doctors. Nothing but the inability to move forward. That lasted about 6 months. My leg is fine today. My heart hurt. So much so I went to a cardiologist to make sure it wasn't something more serious. It was as if my heart had been tinfoil crushed, or sliced open like a fillet, or mallet pounded like beef, or whitewashed in pure blank. Depended on the day, sometimes the hour, which feeling was more true. I honestly could not believe it. My life? My life? This is my life. One day I was in the full swing of me, and the next day I was an ex-wife living in what felt like exile? How did that happen? Did it? I can't tell you how many times I woke up in the morning thinking, is this a dream? Did reality shift somewhere when I wasn't paying attention? Did this really happen to me, to my life? Did I walk through some invisible door? I looped and looped and looped on these questions. Today I can see I was in shock and should never have made the decision and all the resulting decisions so quickly. That's the advice anyone who's been through any big loss gives. The advice I have given others. But like I said, everything went fast. Like a hand on a hot stove, every reminder of us felt dangerous to my survival. I could not get away fast enough. I could have packed up my 200 square feet of now hell and moved back, but within days, maybe the same day, I don't know, he was with someone else. I could not bear to see it, and I didn't know where else to go. A few weeks after our over-the-phone breakup, I was back at the farm to pack up. I had a flight to be there for Christmas anyway. Scotty and I agreed it was like cutting off a perfectly good right arm. I asked, why then did he want this? He said he didn't know. I asked, what did I do wrong? He said nothing. I was impeccable, one of the most amazing people he would ever know. I asked, is there any way? No, he said, there wasn't. I knew him well enough to know that was true. I could not feel him. He was already gone. Terry helped me pack what little I would take and put in storage, despite not feeling well. She insisted I not do it alone. The formidable one within me rose one final time to dismantle my life. It was a slash and burn, a letting go of each and every cherished thing I'd found along life's way, many from even before Scotty. Like most women in a marriage, I had created the house and made it a home. I didn't have time to figure out how to sort what was important or emotionally process even a sliver of those decisions. I couldn't think because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't bear to breathe. On our last days together in person, Scotty and I went over the few details to be decided. What was I to do with the emotional connection built through our rituals, I wanted to ask. How would I undo all our weddings in every country we traveled to, even if not legal? Instead, we talked money, the house, and things, like a business, not a love story, not our life. Even in the U.S., we had never married legally, so that part was easy. Too easy. We had our one last Christmas with a massive elephant in the room, celebrating the way we had for a dozen years before, with family and food and board games, and me washing the dishes alone in the kitchen. And then, that was that. Done. I had one more day before my flight back, but we'd been efficient and everything was finished. Everything was finished. So I booked a hotel and left. I walked out the door of my life, painfully conscious. I would only see Scotty one more time, briefly, the night his mother was dying, almost 5 years later. We never talked about us or anything. He was flying into his new life. I was dying in mine. Driving out that long solstice drive I loved so much for the final time, I could barely see. Someone wake me up. Tell me what happened. Tell me why. I somehow knew I would never get an answer. I would have to find a way to live with that. With no explanations, no story to go on, no story even within myself, the demons of each and everything I might have done wrong that could have been my fault, that probably I'd missed the clues for, kicked into full gear. Every single fault, potential fault, and stretch of a maybe fault was raked over in my psyche, like red-hot coals heaped on a pile of composting confusion. Karma's a bitch, some inner voice taunted me. That would go on for years. Years. A death without dying, I thought. I wasn't wrong. I wanted, needed to talk to Terry, but how could I? She was dying again, actively dying, for real. This time she didn't ask for my healing help. She visited me in California once, the last time I saw her, and we talked about what it would be like for her to die if it went that way. She was not ready to give up hope, and I would not tell her about the dream with the sarcophagus. There was no way I was going to interfere with her own ways of knowing. Besides, I could have been wrong. This time, I prayed I was. And so it was that next New Year's Eve, it was time for our last call. She hadn't wanted anyone there but her family, and I respected that. I thought, this is so like Terry, hating the holidays and probably not willing to see even one more day of another year. I wanted to show up well, but also, I didn't want her to go. I needed her not to go. My psyche could not afford this. But this was her time, not mine. For her sake, I had to let her go. I loved her more than enough to do that. I settled into the reality of, this is it, and offered my voice, hoping it might heal something, even if not cure it. She could not speak in return, but her husband held up the phone to her ear and said she had indicated that she knew it was me. Look, Terry, I said, how the green of the grass is so very green. how the trees are so very tree-ish and the mountains are so tall. You saw everything there was to see, and time would only have offered you more of that. But you got what you came for here on planet Earth. You really did. You got life. You got spirit. You are eternally, intentionally, and epically optimistic. And so what else could you find on the other side of this beautiful illusion but more of that? Listen, Terry, I'm not thinking of you. I am with you as you cross to where I too will one day come to see you. In the meantime, you better come to visit me. Her husband said, she smiled. And then, with all the words run out, we were done. A 30-year friendship, all the years, all the care, complete. I hung up the phone and spent my New Year's Eve alone in my apartment with no one to talk to, as I felt her last moments tick by and her surge into the heavens. Her husband texted me a screenshot of the nurse's board just before she passed. Her last medication was called Robinol. He said he was glad I was there for her at the very end. I was too. And so, the only person left in my life was Salome. But increasingly, she was unavailable, unstable, and sometimes unkind. I'd hear tales of how everyone was against her and how her other friends and helpers were no longer on her side. Salome was a genius, and with that, a little paranoid. She could make up stories where there weren't any. I just can't, she would say when I asked for help, even when I said I could really use her help. And so, per our long friendship agreement, I didn't ask for more than she wanted to give. Also, I wondered when I might be the next friend to take the fall. There were not many left from her inner circle. One night, not long after Terry's death, she called sounding frantic. She'd lost the password to her PayPal account and could not pay the mortgage on her 2 Portland homes, one of which she rented out. The money was there, but she could not get at it soon enough. Would I pay it personally right away? Of course I did, and then got on the phone to help her sort the PayPal. True to her word, there was plenty of money sitting there. Did she want me to just transfer the amount to my account, I asked. No, she said. Would you like my address then? For what? To send me a check? She sounded surprised at the idea, and I knew she wasn't writing down my address when I gave it to her. My gut sank. She wasn't planning on paying me back. That alone was fine. I would have gifted her the money. But I knew Salome. She'd make up a story about it, say she was ashamed, and so have reason to avoid me, like her mail sitting on the table, and the others in her life. Salome, my dear mentor and friend, never spoke to me again. A few years later, quite by accident, I discovered that she had died. No one had thought to tell me, and Salome surely had not come to visit from the other side. I learned it was alcohol-related. Oh, Salome, it could have been so different. Astonishingly, I wrote a poem just hours before I found out about her death. It was an oddly prepared poem, one I pieced together to accompany an art collage. One picture cut, then I'd write a line, another picture, another line. There was no plan, no theme even. But this is what came out. There is a door. When you are ready, open it. Blue will greet you like the friend she is. She will sing and count in the ways you have forgotten, to remember you whole. Strange beings, you call them aliens, but they are home, will look at you and wonder. No one really thought you would make it back, at least so soon. The stars will remind you how they watched over you every night, though you hardly paid attention. It's not your fault. Flowers, too, will be there, your daytime guides who always thought you were as lovely as you thought them. Blue will say it's time to go. We have things to discuss, like your upside-down poems, which you forgot were your most important work. You will remember who you have loved in a spirit that counts no cost, sees only positives, so you can know it for what it really was. Time will come out of hiding and explain herself. You'll nod, but still be a little pissed, which means you'll make another wish and find another door. And on it goes, like nothing ever happened anywhere. Of course, once I learned of her death, I knew that poem was for her. It fit so perfectly. It was as if I had known. After so many poems written to help her feel special and loved over so many years, I titled it For Salome, the last one. So that was it. Scotty gone, Terry gone, Salome gone, and lion gone, shamanism gone, home, front porch, Irish landscape, things that were once mine, gone, 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 gone. Kids close for a hug and a mother-son lunch, gone. It felt like I was a child again. Roxanne gone, Nell gone, Joanne, my father, my brother. Karma's a bitch, I get it, but this much? Was I that bad? When? Who hated me? Why? Hadn't I learned to love and love well? Didn't that count for something? This isn't humbling me, I screamed, hoping to reach a guide or two of the supposed 40 to 50, all of whom were eerily silent. This is more like annihilation. That's when it hit me. That's exactly what this was. Annihilation. All this was intended. My alchemical journey was meant to annihilate me. Robin. Completely, it seemed. These lifelong losses were the chosen method of annihilation. Kill Robin. See if anything's left. I had entered the longest, hardest journey of my life. And as you know by now, that was saying something. This journey was to the deepest parts and places within. Knowing that, should you get lost, there will be no one to save you but yourself. That is especially difficult when you are aware that, no matter how far you dig, there is no self to be found. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.